What's up, y'all? I made a big mistake yesterday. I didn't do it intentionally, but somebody pointed it out to me. And whenever I make a mistake, I want to just retract the statement that I make and correct it because I'm not above that. And sometimes it's hard to do that, especially when you feel like you made a really good point. It's like you want to feel like you did 100%. You made your point 100% correctly, and you don't need to retract anything. Most of what I said, I still stand by, but I did make a specific mistake about Dan, the video man's title, and like what his actual like status is as somebody who works. So he is a private contractor, meaning the law and everything applies differently of how this can be handled. But it's still going to work out, y'all, and I'm going to show you. Okay, so this might actually be better that Dan is an independent contractor than an employee. Depending on the terms of the contract / how complex the contract agreement is, it might make it easier to let Dan go and just hire a new contractor. As an employee, you have to change the whole policy, and then for that to work, you have to say you can't allow any kind of pins, buttons, materials, shirts that promote any specific belief system, ideology, or whatever. But since Dan is a private contractor, the easiest thing to do would be to just let him go. Hire a new contractor. The only potentiality that can cause an issue is the contract details. How serious are the contract details? Because that matters. And guess what? I'm no lawyer, so this is not any kind of legal advice, but this is what I'm coming across. I did take a class in business law. It was a while ago, but I know about the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And here's the interesting thing, really interesting thing. So who's covered by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission? People who are not employed by their employer, such as independent contractors, are not covered by the anti-discrimination laws. And that's a very key thing to understand here. Because if Dallas is like, I want to hire a new contractor, Dan, from my understanding, cannot sue Dallas or anything because of a discrimination lawsuit. Just couldn't do it unless Dallas breaks a contract. Then Dan could come at Dallas with, hey, you broke the contract. This is another law site. Can an independent contractor bring a discrimination claim? The state and federal laws against discrimination in the workplace only apply to employees, not independent contractors. This means if you are properly classified as an independent contractor, you cannot bring a discrimination claim if you are terminated or otherwise mistreated. So number 2, Dallas didn't even mention how hard it would be to let go of Dan. This is what really makes me think, y'all, that, hey, this is not that big of a deal. If Dallas actually wanted to let go of Dan and hire a new contractor, it wouldn't be that big of a deal because he didn't even mention this in this whole 19-minute video, however long it was. Dallas is an intelligent guy, I can tell. So the reason Dallas responded was to defend his position, and The Chosen, in my opinion, if Dallas wanted to further silence the critics, he would have said I couldn't have even terminated Dan if I wanted to, due to the terms of the contract. But he didn't even mention that. If I were Dallas and I wanted to silence the people complaining, I'd be like, hey, look, Dan has a contract with us for this specific amount of time, 2-3 more years, maybe 2 more seasons. And look, I think it would be good to just hire a new contractor to just silence all this mess. But I can't. I just can't do it because I would be breaking the contract. But he didn't mention any of that. And I think he would have if he was in that position to where he just couldn't back out of a contract. So this is a law site called Wessel Sherman. How does a company properly terminate independent contractors? When there's a written agreement, one of the first things I ask the client is whether there's a written agreement between the independent contractor and the company. So this is saying there may not even be a written agreement. I'm not sure what Dallas's contract entails. This is if it's just verbal or oral, or if it's actually a written contract. Many independent contract agreements have termination provisions which describe under what conditions the agreement can be terminated by either the company or the independent contractor. These independent contractor termination provisions should be strictly followed to avoid breach contract lawsuits. So if, Dallas and Dan are in a contract, from what Dallas has revealed, that Dan is independent contractor. So there is a contract. The thing is, would there be a breach? Dallas cannot breach the contract unless he wants to deal with legal issues. Additionally, independent contractor agreements frequently have notice provisions under which a certain number of days or weeks notice must be given by the terminating party to legally terminate the agreement. These provisions should be strictly followed. And these are sample termination provisions. Without cause, by 30 days, prior written notice by either party. And then with cause, immediately upon material breach of any term of this agreement by either of the parties. This is Papaya Global. What if your contract does not have a termination clause? According to the experts, you can still terminate an agreement with the independent contractor if you give reasonable notice. There's no set amount of dates that are required, but depending on the circumstances, you can give 2 weeks or up to 90-day notice. One exception to the notice period is if the contractor engages in any criminal activity, which doesn't apply here, but it's still egregious activity, the pride flag on a set. Can the independent contractor sue for wrongful termination? Contractors aren't considered employees, so as long as you follow the agreed upon contract, you can let them go as needed, and they cannot sue for wrongful termination. 1099 employees can sue for breach of contract, though, if you don't respect the contract terms and conditions. So the main thing is, would Dallas violate the contract that he has with Dan by letting him go now or in the near future? And again, he didn't specifically say, hey, I just can't let him go because of the contract. So my thinking is the contract isn't really obligating him to stay in this contract with Dan. He can probably, from my understanding, look for somebody else if he really wanted to. When terminating a contract, be sure you're not falling into one of these 3 illegal scenarios. Violation of contractual terms. Dallas can't do this, depending on his contract terms, which I don't know specifically. All right, so this is a site talking about construction law, but I don't see why it wouldn't apply here because it's still talking about private contractors. So this is the cool thing that I don't know if this is in Dallas's contract. Termination without cause. But first, what is terminating a contract with cause? Termination with cause may occur when one party cannot uphold their end of the contract by virtue of a reason or circumstance outlined within the contract. These include financial trouble, quality of work disputes, failure to keep up with the contractual schedule of a project, failure to pay, etc., etc. Similar, if the other party has not upheld a material component of the contract, they've essentially breached the contract, giving you the right to terminate the contract for a cause. Meaning basically a reason. There should be a reason for the contract to be terminated. But terminating a contract without cause is something that exists. Termination without cause means to terminate the contract even though there is no specific reason for doing so. This may also be referenced as termination for convenience. When a party decides they want to terminate a contract for convenience, it is important to look at the contents of the contract that was signed. To legally terminate a contract without cause, there needs to be a termination for convenience clause specifically stated. There is no grounds to terminate for convenience if this clause is not included in the contract. Now, I don't know if this clause was in Dallas's contract that he made for Dan, the video guy, the flamboyant video guy. But if it is in there, he doesn't have to give any reason to terminate Dan. Be like, hey, you know what? I just want to hire a new contractor. I want to do things better on the set, and I just want to hire a new contractor. Don't got to give him any reason. Terminate without cause. Now, this brings me to number 3. How can this situation be avoided in the future? Since independent contractors have more freedom to do as they please, as they are their own boss, we just went over, certain workplace policies do not apply to them as they would an employee. So it seems the only method may be to properly screen the contractor, and if you just can't tell that the person is outwardly in promotion of sin or something that opposes Christianity, a termination for convenience clause probably should be added to the contract. Also, I'm sure they can find a Christian man somewhere that can operate the Steadicam that Dan operates. Now, a big reason that Dallas wants to just hire anybody, not depending on their faith, is because he wants the best product available to make the best production available. I understand that quality matters. Quality matters. He wants a high level production, but can he not find somebody who is at least not outwardly promoting sin to operate a Steadicam? I really highly disagree that's not a potential reality. I would think he could find somebody that's not promoting pride or any kind of sin that can operate the Steadicam. find a new contractor. And again, I don't think that it's going to be hard for him to get out of the contract because he didn't even mention how hard that would be. And he would have mentioned it if it would have been hard because it would have helped his point. So this brings me to point number 4, which is the last point. It seems that Dallas can make changes, but just doesn't want to. Due to all that we went over, I personally believe Dallas can make changes to bring on a new contractor in the near future and to prevent this situation from happening again. But he's just choosing not to. And I just want to specify, y'all, that some of this is speculation. I, of course, do not know the exact terms of the contract that Dallas has with Dan, the Steadicam operator. I don't know. I haven't seen the contract. But what I'm saying is based off of he didn't even mention that in his video. And it would have been smart for him to mention that because he's defending his position and what he's doing. And if it's an independent contractor, he could have just said, look, this contract is with Dan for 3 more years. Even if we wanted to, we couldn't let go of Dan. So I'm sorry, but he's going to be with us for 3 more years based on legal reasons. But he didn't mention that. Wouldn't you have mentioned that if you were in the same situation and you were trying to defend your position in your show? I would have. He didn't mention any of that. And again, this actually might make it easier because you don't have to change the whole policy. You just hire a new contractor. You don't even have to change the policy of the specific materials you can have on the set. You can just hire a new contractor that won't promote something exactly opposing Christianity. And yeah, I'm not beyond retracting my statements. I'm not beyond being corrected. I was wrong in what I said. It wasn't based on 100% facts. I messed up and I overlooked what Dallas said about the guy as a private contractor. What I was saying was based off that he was an employee, but I didn't get that fact correct. So now I'm correcting myself and giving my 2 cents on what could potentially be done based on this new information that I've come across. Again, I'm no legal expert. I'm no lawyer. This is not legal advice. I'm just using my mind that God gave me and logic to see a potential solution that Dallas can actually implement if he really wanted to, if he really wanted to protect his show and the mission that he believes God has given him to promote Jesus and the gospel. Because this stuff needs to be protected, y'all.